So first off, I'm going to introduce myself. My name's Dane, as you can see on that PowerPoint, and I'm an applications engineer here at Hawk Ridge Systems. And I'm going to spend about an hour today showing you the first half of our night school that we toured with. So I have an attendance view here, so I'm going to do this presentation a little slower just to make sure that everyone can see what I'm doing. And there seems to be a bit of a 3 to 4 second delay in when I click and when it actually broadcasts to you guys. So be patient. This is going to be a nice, slow, methodical process, but I'm sure everyone can walk away here learning something new. So we're going to do a case study of a soapbox derby racer. For those of you who don't know what that is, you get some sort of cart, for lack of a better term, bike, buggy, and you push it down a big hill and it's a race. So the clients I have started out with this nice pink tricycle here, and you can see those tassels there helped really add the speed. But after their first run down the hill, they had a bit of a spill, and this is what happened. It got bent, it crashed. So for round 2 of their race, they kind of had to improvise, and they grabbed some scrap materials from maybe some other teams or what they found lying around near dumpsters, and they built what I like to call here as the TDI, or the terrifying downhill invention. So you can see, looks very comfortable, gets about 55 miles per gallon, which is pretty good, but not a very safe ride, definitely not a very comfortable ride. So that's when they decided to ask Hawk Ridge to get involved. And this is the design that we have come up with for the future for our soapbox derby team. So all that boring modeling and simulating, that was done by some of my colleagues. What I'm going to show you guys today is the exciting world of drawings and detailings. So it is one of the most important, because if you cannot communicate your designs to your manufacturers, you can't get any of your products made. So this is the agenda that we're going to follow. We're going to do sections 1 and 2 today, and then next week we will do sections 3 and 4. So we're going to start off with kind of just the standard workflow that you'd go through when you take on a new project. So we're going to talk about templates and sheet formats, and that's going to standardize all of our drawings for the project, or all of the drawings throughout our whole company, to make sure that everything is standardized, looks the same, and all of our machinists that we use will know where to look for information on our drawings, because they will always be located in the same place. There's a lot of ambiguity and misconceptions about templates, sheet formats, sheet properties, so I'm going to try and set that straight for everyone and clarify what the difference between them all is and what they all do. And then I'm going to go into some custom view creation. So not just your standard views, how to make some unique or abstract off regular views. So in our first section, we're going to start off by converting an old DWG drawing to a SolidWorks template. So we got some legacy data and we're going to reuse it. We're going to look at the sheet and the sheet format, how to add dimensions and relations in the sheet format. We're going to talk about blocks, inserting logos, watermarks, anchor points, views, and then intelligent title block information. In our second round, we're going to talk about different ways to make custom views. So you can update your standard view, you can insert a relative to model view, there's auxiliary views, you can save new views, and then you can lock some view focus, sheet focus, position, doing non-circular detailed views, break views, exploded views, isometric section views, annotation views, and using display states and configurations inside of your drawings. So we're going to jump into SolidWorks now. And I'm going to let everyone's screen catch up here. And we're going to import a DWG file that I have here. So this is some old legacy data. I really like the formatting of the template. So we're going to import that and use all of that information so I don't really have to start from scratch. So when I have this importer, I can take this information and I can insert it into a drawing, or I can insert it into a part. So if I had some 2D geometry there, I can insert that into a part as a 2D sketch and maybe extrude that and start making a part from it. But that's not what I want to do. I want to use the formatting of this drawing and create myself a new drawing template. So I'm going to create a new SolidWorks drawing. And inside my importer, I have layers. So the DWG file has these layers, and that's where you have the boxes on the left with the check marks, right there where I'm pinging my mouse. And then above that, I have the layers of the SolidWorks drawing that I'm going to create. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my DWG format layers into my SolidWorks format. So that's what I did. I hit the radio button for the SolidWorks sheet format, and then I toggled on the formatting layers from my DWG. I can also give this format a name, and that will propagate the name of the sheet every time. So I'm just going to call it sheet 1 for lack of creativity, but if you have a different format, maybe when you're doing DXFs, then you can have that automatically propagate as DXF, or maybe for your assemblies you have a different format, so you can name it assembly view or whatever you want. You can customize that just to save you the step of renaming your drawings every time you create a new sheet. So then we have our import properties. So if you look on the screen, there's a little red box, and that red box is representing our sheet size. So my sheet size is just a B landscape. That's the size I want. But we can see that what I'm importing is way too big. It's massive. And that's because I'm taking the units from the DWG and I'm importing them in feet. So I can come in here and change that to inches. And now we can see that's fitting perfectly inside of my red sheet. I can change my drawing sheet scale, but I'm going to leave it at 1:1. And then down in the bottom left, I have my geometry positioning, and I'm going to position this imported data into the center of the sheet. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to hit finish, and we're going to see that I have myself a nice SolidWorks drawing with all of that information. So I can't grab any of this information on my sheet. So I'm sitting here dragging around, trying to grab it. You can see all the boxes I'm making, but I can't grab anything. And that's because it's in the format layer. That's where I told it to go, and that's where it is. So I'm going to toggle to this graphic here to try and explain the difference between sheet formats, the sheet, and then the drawing template. So I like to think of it as 3 different levels or layers of it. So at the very bottom, you have your sheet format, and that is this grayer line in the middle. You can see my mouse pinging on it, and that's the very bottom level. And inside your sheet format, you store things like your title block, your border, your notes. You can embed images. You can put custom properties in there, and your anchor points for all of your tables that you're going to import. So one more layer up from that is your actual sheet. So that's kind of the piece of paper that your sheet format goes on. So your sheet itself will store the sheet format, your projection type, and your view and datum labels along with your scale. So all of that is stored at the sheet level, and then encompassing all of that in that full external box is the drawing template. So the drawing template will hold your sheet, your sheet format, everything that those contain, but it will also hold all of your document properties. So that's all of the options that you have that you can customize, and you can put maybe some predefined views in there, but all of that is stored inside of the template. So coming back into my drawing, I now want to access all of this data that I just imported. So there's a couple ways that I can do that. I can right-click on my sheet, and I can edit my sheet format, or I can go to my property manager on the left, grab my sheet format, right-click on it, and hit edit sheet format. So once I do that, you can see all of my colors change. I now have that blue underdefined sketch entities. And if I grab them, lo and behold, they are underdefined and they move around and they are free to move. So I don't really want that. I want to constrain all these. So I could sit here and I could add dimensions and relations for hours and hours and try and lock all this stuff down, but there's some tools that can do that for me. So inside my tools drop down under relations, I have this constrain all option. And when I click on it, you're going to see that it has given me 87 relations added to this sketch. So if I turn on my relations, we can see it's now polka dotted with all my little green boxes. I can zoom in on them, and I can see that I'm getting some collinear relations. Lines were locked horizontal. I'm getting some vertical. And that's building some intelligence into this format that I have here. I have another tool in my relations called scan equal. And what that's going to do is that's going to look for lines that are the same length and give them an equal relation. So you can see at the top here in my kind of selection color light blue that a bunch of lines were grabbed, and I have the option to, okay, ignore or set it as equal. So I'm going to set those as equal, and you can see a bunch of equal relations appeared. It grabs the next one. And I'm just going to mash through this and set all of those lines to equal length. So my grid spacing will stay the same, and whatever else is set as the same length. So once I close that, I can grab some of these boundaries, and we can see there's some intelligence now in my model. And by model, I mean format. So it grows and it stretches kind of evenly and uniformly. So because of that, I can use this now to create multiple sizes of my formats. So I'm going to grab my dimension tool, and I'm just going to dimension my total height there. And I'm going to turn off my relations now because they're getting a little busy. And now I have a way to change my formatting size if I change my sheet size really easily. So now I'm just going to leave them, and I'll probably want to use a bigger font, so I'll get that column a bit bigger. But now I have some dimensions, so I can just change these numbers, and boom, 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 my formatting is going to grow, and I can scale it to my sheet size with just 3 clicks instead of having to redefine everything. And that's because I put in all of those relations. So if I leave my sheet format, those dimensions are still there. I can't grab them unless I'm at the format level, but this could be really confusing for people, like why are these dimensions here? What's going on? So I'm just going to hide them. So if I control select all of these dimensions here, I can right click and I can hide them, and then they're gone. If I ever want to bring them back, I can use my hide show annotations command, and that gives me the ability to toggle on if they are hidden or if they are shown. But I'm going to leave them all hidden because I don't need to show all those. And that's what I'm going to do. So I have some notes, and I'm sure you've noticed as you're trying to put notes down, there's the little yellow lines that appear to help line things up. Now those are really handy, but sometimes they inhibit you from putting your note exactly where you want to put it. So if you hold down the Alt button, it will negate all of those automatic alignments, and then you're free to move that note wherever you want. So even though those alignments are really helpful, sometimes you're aligning with things that are irrelevant. You're like, nah, I don't want to put that there. So if you hold down that Alt key, you're free to move this note around without it being automatically snapped to other notes. There's another nice little hidden alignment tool, and if you right-click on a note, there's this snap to rectangle center option. And what that does is exactly what it sounds like it'll do. It'll line it up to a rectangle. So I'm going to grab 4 sides of this box here, and then we can see that note shifted over, and it's aligned in the middle of the box. You're probably looking at that right now and you're going, Dane, that's not in the middle of the box, man. You're crazy. What are you talking about? Well, the note itself is. So if you see this little orange box that my mouse is on, that's actually in the middle, but the font that I have has this extra gap after the lettering, so the whole letter is shifted a little bit to the left. If I change my font, then that would be perfectly center, but the note itself is actually in the center of the box. There's this lock unlock note button, and this will lock only the position of my note. It won't actually lock the text, so I'm still free to change the text, and it is still free to update if I have linked it to my revision custom property. But this will lock its position and still allow me to change the content on the inside. So I have a title and a drawing number and this nice kind of project heading at the top. Now I don't want to have to input that information every time. I want that to automatically propagate depending on what model I'm using. So if I come in here and edit my note, there is this nice link to property button inside of my property manager. So when I click on that, I have a bunch of options. I can link to a property inside my current document. So that would be this drawing document. So I can grab things like my sheet scale, total number of sheets, the title of this document that I have here, the author of it, things like that. Or I can grab from the model of whatever view I'm going to place in here. So the view is referencing the model. I can also grab some custom properties from that model. So that's what I'm going to do in this situation. So for my title, I'm going to grab the custom property of the description from my part file. While I'm in here, I'm also going to look for the part number as well as the project. So that is grabbing information all from the part or assembly file. So now I just have to link it. I'm going to say, okay, where I have the title box for this drawing, it's going to pull the description from the part file, and it's going to put whatever string of text I have in the part file. I'm going to do the same kind of thing for the drawing number. For my drawing number, I'm just going to grab the part number from the part or assembly file. And for my heading at the top here, I'm going to link that to the property from the model, which is going to be the project. So you can see right now the text is kind of just some coding syntax. And what that's doing is that is grabbing information from the part or assembly file and looking at the custom property, project description, and or part number. So this drawing that I have here and some of the stuff I need to manufacture, I'm going to have to outsource internationally. So I'm going to have to send some to Asia, some to Europe, some to South America, and they use different projection styles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add just an angle of projection box just so I can really clarify which formatting I'm using. So I'm just going to grab my standard sketch entity of a line, and I'm going to make a line. I'm just going to add that to my title block here. I'm going to copy this note so I can grab the same font and formatting, and I'm just going to paste my note right in here, and I'll change this to angle of projection. So I'm going to use a block now. So if you're an AutoCAD user, I'm sure you're really familiar with blocks. But if you've never worked with blocks before, what they are is they are just a collection of sketch entities where the relative geometry between them is fixed. So this little block that I have here moves as one whole unit. I can't change the relative position of them or sizes of them unless I go in and edit the block. Now this block can be linked to the block file, so if I go into the block file and I'm using this block in multiple places, it can change that block in every single place it's used. I can come in and play around with the scale. I can make it really big, or I can make it really small, again keeping all of that relative information between those entities the same. So I'm going to fix the location of that block. That looks really good to me, and that's showing anyone that looks at this that I am using third angle projection. I want to customize this further. I want to put my company logo in here as a nice image or a graphic. So there's two different tools that we have to do that. We can insert an object or we can insert a picture. So I'm going to show you them both just for the sake of academia. So the cool thing about inserting objects is that you can insert pretty much any native Windows file. So you can do Excel files, you can put in some PowerPoint, you can put in Word documents, WordPad, Paint images, anything like that. And you can link that object to the file. So let me grab the nice little picture that I have of our Hawk Ridge logo, and I'm going to hit this link button. So anytime I make a change to the file, it's going to automatically update inside of my drawing document. So since this is an image, I can scale this down really easily just with the drag and drop in the corners. Or I can come into the properties and set the width, set the height, something like that. Using this workflow for a company logo is probably not the best idea because your company logo is fairly static, but I just wanted to do it to show you guys the possibilities. So maybe if you have a roster or something that you have in an Excel file and you want that on your drawings every time, or any Word document with some notes and maybe your notes are changing all the time and you want those set in the corner but you want them kind of dynamic with the power of Word there. You can do things like that, but I'm going to show you those changes. So I have my drawing file here. I'm just going to switch to Paint and look at my logo here, and I'm going to make some changes to it. I'm going to draw some streamlines in here, show that the hawk's flying real fast. And I'm going to save this file. I'm going to go back to SolidWorks. So now every time I open this drawing file, so I should probably save it first. Every time I open this drawing file, it's going to look at those references. So we can see here that it says, okay, do you want to update my links? I said yes, and now we have those awesome streamlines in my drawing. I didn't have to do any re-importing or anything. That happened all automatically. So one more time, just to clean that up, I'll bring the image back to the way it's supposed to be. I'll save the image, go back to SolidWorks, reopen it, and it reads that file and notices that, okay, no, it's changed, there's no more red lines there. So again, that's not the way I'd insert a company logo. I just couldn't think of a better idea to show that nice object. So the other way to do it is to insert a picture. And in this insert picture, you have a little bit more tools for sizing it. I can move the position via coordinates. I can change the angle that this picture's sitting at. I can play with the size in here, of course, locking the aspect ratio. I can also invert images, flip them flip them around, do lots of fun stuff like that. But there's a scaling tool, which is really nice. So what I can do is I can line up my scaling tool here all the way to the wingspan, and I can set the wingspan as 2 inches. And what that does is it sets up, okay, that line is 2 inches long, and it rescales my whole picture for me. There's also some transparency options. So if you want to maybe use this as a watermark, you can change the whole image slightly transparent and push it to the back, or have it in the front and slightly transparent. However you want to do that, there's some pretty cool options, but I'm just going to leave that object one because I thought objects were pretty cool, and that I'm sure someone will find a nice application for it inside of their drawings, whether it's a maybe company roster or some notes down here that might change. So I'm going to tell you guys a story. I was working somewhere, and one of the drafters went down to the shop floor, and they were talking to one of the machinists about how they want all of their part dimensioned, just to get some advice there. And they talked about it, they sorted it out, and they left that drawing down in the shop. And then people walked away. Someone else picked it up, started making it, and one of those parts was made, and it was just a nightmare. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a document status watermark on this drawing file here. So I'm going to make it really big so it's impossible to miss, and I'm going to put it as this nice little gray color. But I'm not just going to write words. I'm going to link it to a custom property here, and I'm going to leave it on this current document, but I'm going to make a new property called document status. Now if I'm using PDM or something, I can have my PDM workflows change the text or the value inside of this box. So by default it's going to be set for release, but maybe in my PDM workflow, once it gets pushed to the proper management, it'll automatically change that to ready for release, or just completely blank. So then nothing is coming across my screen. But this is hopefully going to make it impossible for anyone to accidentally make parts that aren't ready. So I'm going to rotate this 30 degrees, and since it is just a watermark, I'm going to put it behind the sheet. So I'm going to put it at the very, very back. So everything that gets made is going to be in front of it. But now I have this custom property, which is really nicely visually displayed on my drawing, telling me if it is the status of the document. And again, your PDM can change that, or maybe just the manager, when they've released it, can come in and change that value there. Your sheet format stores those anchor points, and we can view those anchor points in our property manager over here. So I can see where my general table is, where my bill of materials is, and those are represented by those little black dots that are appearing. My whole table, my weldment table, and as we can see, they're all really on the outside perimeter and wouldn't make a lot of sense going there. So I'm going to change them. So just hovering over some sort of vertex, right-clicking on it, and going down to set as anchor, you have a list for which table you want it to be. So right under my logo here, I'm going to lock that to bill of materials. That looks good to me. And down here in the bottom right, I'm going to grab another vertex, hover over it, right-click on it, set it as an anchor point, and this will be my revision table. So now I can easily snap those tables to the locations that I want them to be. I have all this information down here in my title block, and I want my drafters to be able to import the information here, but I don't want them to have to go down to the format level, because they might be starting to change line sizes, messing with this format, and I want that to stay nice and standardized. So I have this cool option here called title block fields. And that's just by right-clicking on the background I accessed it, or you can search for it in your commands. But what it does is it creates this area where I can make notes accessible from the default level of your drawing, so you don't have to come into the formatting. So I'm going to select all of these notes here. And the order of them is important because you can use Tab to toggle through all of your title block fields. And you can also leave a tooltip. So maybe for the date, I can show an example of the formatting. Or maybe the formatting, I want to show the name, like capital letter, the first name, and full last name or something. So I can leave all those tooltips to hopefully make it really easy to standardize my formatting. So I've made that title block. I'm going to go up a level. So I can't grab any of my formatting. This is where you'd start throwing down views and stuff. But if you come to the title block and put your mouse over it, you see this nice little dashed line appears. And if I double click, I can now start editing all of this information. And of course, pushing the Tab button will toggle through them, and Shift Tab will toggle through them in the reverse direction. So I don't know how good your feedback is of me spamming through my Tab button, but Tab will toggle through them, Shift Tab will toggle backwards. And then just hitting the checkbox will leave that area there. So that's all fine and dandy, that works out, but as you can see in this drawing here, somebody put today down instead of the date. They didn't follow the formatting that I wanted. People were making mistakes, so I gotta find another way to do this. So I want them to have the flexibility to import the information themselves, but I don't want to give them free rein to put anything. I want it in a controlled environment. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to take all of this information and I'm going to link them to a custom property. So the same way that I link the title and the drawing number, and I should link the material, weight, and finish as well. But I'm going to use the custom property tab over here to generate those custom properties in a controlled environment. So if we look at my custom properties right now, I have just the ones that I've already created for referencing in my format. But I'm going to come over here and I want to create a drawn by, and there's a list that I can pick from. So it has the formatting that I want. I can pick who drew it, and then I can get this calendar date here and click on the date, and then that will standardize the formatting of the date as well. It's always going to come out the same way no matter what. So when you get to those earlier months and the earlier weeks in the month and it's 2/5 and you don't know exactly what it's talking about because everyone's doing it differently, this will solve that problem there. So as soon as I hit this apply button, it will create those custom properties for me. And we can see when I open my custom properties that I have that drawn by property, and it has that exact information that I chose. It has the drawn date, and then it has the fact that the document has not been checked. So I can come in here, I can check the document, say this guy checked it, he's going to check it tomorrow. And then he's an engineer, so he gives it approval on that same day. So hitting apply comes in and it adds all of those custom properties again. So let's say, okay, you made a mistake there, you want to change it, or you want to take it from checked to unchecked. Well, you can do that the same way. You can come in here, make changes to this, uncheck things, hit apply, and then you can see that everything has been updated. So engineering approval is no longer approved, and it was checked by somebody different. So that's a nice way to create custom properties to ensure that you're generating all of the custom properties that you need, and you can control the input of those custom properties. So the way that I did that is using the Property Tab Builder. So that comes with every version of SolidWorks, and this reminds me a lot of those drag and drop website builders. If you've ever used something like that, you drag in what you want and you set it all up. So I'm going to open that one that we were experiencing. So up here I have a nice group box, and inside that group box I have drug a list, and this list creates the custom property drawn by. So I typed that in there, And it's pulling information from an Excel file. So the list of values that I'm allowed to assign to that custom property are being pulled from sheet 1, E2 to E7 of this Excel file somewhere on my computer. Then for the date, I just grabbed a text box and set it to type date, so then that calendar propagates and you can grab that as well. So then you can have these check boxes, and this gets a little more complicated, so when it's checked off, these other boxes appear, and you can just change those by clicking on them. So you click in here and then it shows you everything that appears, and you can click to toggle it off, things like that. And then you can build this nice kind of easy workflow to ensure all of your custom properties are being generated the way that you want them to generate. So you can do that for drawing files, part files, and assembly files. Exit without saving, yes. So if your drawing is referencing things in a part file, you can run this custom properties builder on your part files to make sure that those properties actually exist, so your drawing can propagate something instead of it just grabbing at nothing. So I'm happy with my sheet format. Everything is referenced the way that I want it to be referenced, so I'm going to save my sheet format. And I can do that by hitting the File button, coming in here, and the only way to do that is hitting that Save Sheet Format button. So I'm going to come in here, grab my sheet format, give it a name, and I'm going to hit the Save button. So I've saved that sheet format, but technically this drawing document isn't referencing that sheet format because when it got a format, that format didn't exist. So I'm going to go to my sheet properties, and you can do that by right-clicking on the sheet and hitting the Properties button. And this is everything that is stored at the sheet level. So you can see you have your scale, your type of projection, and then your view and datum labels, as well as your sheet format. So right now I don't have a sheet format assigned, but I'm going to grab that one I just created, and I'm going to, yes, assign it to my sheet. So my sheet now is grabbing the appropriate sheet format. So the things that you can save inside of the drawing template, aside from the sheet and the sheet format, is going to be all of your document properties up here. So that's your drafting standard. You can come in and play around with your units. You can change your precision, or maybe if you want to display it in fractions, things like that. But some cool options in the detailing section is the ability to auto-insert things on view creation. So that's over here on the top right, where those circles should be generated depending on how much lag you're getting. But you can create center marks on the holes. You can create center lines on the holes. You can create balloons automatically for your assemblies. But a really cool one is automatically inserting the dimensions marked for drawings. So anytime you're using the Smart Dimension tool in your part file, on the far right-hand side of the tool, there's a little radio button, and you can toggle that on and off and flag them marked for drawing. So if it's flagged marked for drawing, and you have this toggled on, as soon as you insert a view, boom, those dimensions will appear for you. So you can play around with those options, and you can also set views in here. Now when I'm saying view, I'm not talking about model view, but the actual view on your screen. So let's say management has to review your drawings, and they need to really come down here and look at the title block. So saving them from having to zoom in, because maybe they're not too familiar with SolidWorks, they have the zooms all backwards, they do it different than you. I'm just going to save a view to kind of snap to this location very easily. So bringing up my orientation tools by just hitting the spacebar button, you have the ability to add a new view. And I'm going to give that new view a name, and I'm going to call this title block. And now that this new view exists, I can snap between my full screen by clicking that button, all the way down to my title block with just one click. So I can snap between those views very easily and very quickly. I'm going to make another one up here for my bill of materials. So I'll call this bill of materials. And I'll make another one down here for my revision table. So I'll make a new view, revision table. And now I can snap between these views really quickly. So I can go up to my bill of materials, down to my title block, over to my revision table, and then back up to the full view of the drawing really easily with just clicking on those views. So that's all stuff that's kind of stored inside of the template, as well as your sheet options and, of course, your sheet format. So to save a sheet template, you can use your Save As button, and you just change your file type to drawing template, and then you go down and you save that. So let's say you don't have any legacy data and you're trying to make a template from scratch. So there is some really powerful options for that as well. So right now I'm not going to use a sheet format, I'm going to make my own. So when you're in your edit sheet format mode, there's this automatic border button. Now this is really cool because here you can play around with your zones and it'll automatically increment your zones for you. So I can push my zones, my rows up to 8. For my zones, you can play with your line thickness, your margin size, double line your border, play around with a whole bunch of options to generate this. But the best thing about it is that it's actually linked to your zones. So when I come into my sheet properties and go over to my zones, if I change the amount of rows I have, maybe I'll drop that down to 4, but I want more columns, I change those. Those are linked to my border because I use that border tool. So I apply the changes and boom, that changes my border automatically. With that other template that I have, there was no link between the geometry of my border and the actual zone. So if I changed my zones in my sheet properties, I'd have to manually go in there and change that whole border. So then, of course, I can just grab my sketch entities and start putting in any sort of blocks that I want. And of course, my notes to link to all the properties to build myself a whole border from scratch. So I'm going to close all these. And we're going to look at kind of inserting views and making some unique views that are non-standard. So looking at this footrest part, I'm going to look at my front view. And we can see that that view is not really normal to any of the faces. It's kind of at an angle. So I can't draft anything from this. There's nothing square. I look at this one. This is also at an angle. So this part's really unique. Lots of really cool bends to it. And the reason why nothing is lined up nicely is because it was made in context of the whole general assembly. So if I show all these sketches here, we can see that it was made in relation to our driver and our total assembly. And that's why it's sitting at such an abstract angle. It's not lining up nicely with my standard planes or any of my standard views. So there's a couple ways that we can deal with that. A tool that I use a lot and I love to use is the normal to tool. So clicking on a face, and you can either hit Control-8 on your keyboard, that's the hotkey for it, or up here in your pop-up, you can hit the normal to button. It disappeared when I hit Control. But what that'll do is that will, whatever face you clicked on, will make it normal to your screen so you can actually see it. So this is good. Now I can start detailing this a bit easier, but I want to rotate it. So I can hold down Alt and use my mouse wheel, or hold down Alt and use my arrow keys, and that will incrementally rotate my model. Now the amount that it rotates is set in your options, so that's all fine and dandy, but there's a better way to do it. If you select multiple faces and use that normal to tool, the first face that you select will be normal to your screen, and the second face that you select will be normal to the top. So then grabbing those two faces using my normal to command will set this model up the exact way that I want it to be. So now that I have my model oriented the way that I want, I need to create some views. So going back into my orientation bar, there is the option here to update your standard views. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that, and it is asking me, okay, select the standard view you would like to assign the current view to. So I want this to be my new front view. So I come in here and I click my front view, and I get one more warning, and this warning says changing the standard view will change the orientation of any standard, orthogonal, named, and child views in drawings of this model. So if someone else has already made a drawing of this model and they're using front, right, left views, and I change that, that's going to change in their drawing as well. So far I'm the first one, as far as I know, to make a drawing of this part, so I'm just gonna change this. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So let's make a drawing now. So we're gonna grab this part and we're gonna make a drawing from this part, and we're gonna use that template that we spent a whole hour making. And here we go. Right here is my front view, and it looks exactly the way that I want it to. And I can project my right view, and look at that, my right view is what I'd expect. So I'm all happy, I'm going about my business, and one of my colleagues peeks in the door and he's like, man, you messed up my drawing. What'd you do? You changed all the views around. So I'm like, oh, sorry, dude. I didn't know you made a drawing. So all is not lost. I can go back and I can change that. So going back into our orientation commands, I can reset the standard views, and that's the button right beside the update them, and that will send them back to normal. So I reset them, and I can come back now. Now my front view is all angled and different. So that's one way to do it, but if someone's already used this part to create drawings, that's not really an option. Inside your drawing file, so I'm just going to delete these views now. They are not what I need. You can insert a drawing view that's relative to the model. So I click on that, and I get a little message here in my property manager saying select a planar face of a model in the graphics area of another window. So I'm like, okay, I got to change windows. So I go to my part file, and then I see some orientation commands in my property manager. So I need to select a face for my front, so I'm going to select that same face, and I'm going to grab the top here as my top face. So there we go, I have those two selections. I hit OK in my property manager, it brings me back to the drawing, and then I can drop down my new relative to model view. So I can also just project this view, and it's projecting exactly the way that I would anticipate. So that's cool. That's a nice way to make myself a custom drawing view. I want to dimension all these holes at the bottom here, but I'm not flush to the face. So when I click on the edges, I'm getting this kind of projected radius. It's more of an elliptical shape than a true circle. So I want a view that's normal to the face. So I'm just going to use my auxiliary view, and that's in my view layout options. And if I come down here and I click on the edge, it will give me that nice auxiliary view, and I can drop it down exactly where I want it. So that is the true projection of that view using the third angle projection, but it's all kind of sideways. When I dimension this, people are going to have to be turning their heads or turning the piece of paper. I don't really want that. So if I click on the view, up here in my heads-up display, I can grab my rotate view button. So I can grab that and I can rotate the view and I can try and guess the perfect orientation for it. But if I zoom in, I can see that that line that I want to be horizontal is disconnected. It's not actually straight. So that's not really a good way to go about it. But of course, there's a tool for that. So if I select the line that I want to be horizontal, I right-click on it, I can align the drawing view. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to align it to horizontal of the sheet, and I want it to rotate counterclockwise. And after I do that, the view gets aligned perfectly, and it tells me how much the view has been rotated from the true projection. And then I can come in here and start dimensioning all of those nice holes and everything like that. So that's cool. That works out. I want to dimension these side holes now. But again, I'm getting the same issue. Since I'm not looking normal to that face, I'm getting these kind of projected dimensions. So I'm going to show you another way to insert non-standard views. So I'm going to go back to my part file, and I am going to grab one face, and I'm going to control select and grab another face. And I'm going to use that nice normal to command as well. So I can look directly normal to that face with all of those holes. Back to my orientation bar here, I have the option to create a new view. And I'm going to call it side holes. And this view that I create is going to be accessible in my view palette on the drawing file, as well as the orientation bar in the property manager of all of my views. So I'm going to save my part file. I'm going to go over to my drawing, open my view palette, refresh it of course because it's out of date, and I can see now that my side holes view is accessible in my view palette. So I can grab that and I can drop that in place, and there we go. I have that perfect view where I can grab those hole diameters now. And then again on the left, in my more views section of the orientation section of the view property manager, I have the nice option to grab that side holes view. So that's another way to make a non-standard view inside of your drawing. When you're doing detailed views, if you look at your cursor feedback, you always have that circle by your mouse, and you can only really make circles. Well, that's not actually the case, but you have to follow a different workflow to get a non-circular detailed view. So I'm going to just sketch myself a slot here, just like that. And after I've made a sketch, if I pre-select the sketch and then click on my detailed view, you can see that I am getting a non-circular detailed view, which is awesome. Super cool. So new in 2017 are these jagged outlines. So without that, that slot is really symmetric, and it's hard to tell, okay, is that part of this dimple feature? What is that? Is that model geometry? Is that my cut boundary? So with this jagged outline, you can ensure that, okay, yep, that is where it's been cut. That is not part of my model geometry. And you can play around with the intensity of it. You can make it kind of loose like that, or pull it in a little finer. Whatever you want, it just shows that that is kind of cut boundary and not actual model geometry. You can play around with the style of your kind of detailing. So I'm going to add a leader here to my lettering, just like that. But you can come in and maybe make it connected. So you can just connect the dots to find the detailed view. But I like it with the leader. I find that looks really good. location labels can be used to help pinpoint the location of where that B actually is. So I'm going to click on my location label, and I'm going to click on the B itself, and it's going to show me, okay, the view B is on sheet 1. As we can see, our upper text references the sheet, and it is in zone D6. I can do the same thing for the detailed view to show exactly where it's coming from. It's coming from sheet 1 on section C7. So as I move this view around, you can see that live updates happen to that location label. I can also throw a view on a second page, which is sometimes a necessity for really complex drawings. And you're looking here and you're like, man, where is that detailed view of B? Which page is it on? Well, now I know it's on page 2, and I even know that it's in zone D6, so I can go to that page and find it. Or maybe you're looking at a detailed view and you're thinking, okay, what is this? Where did this come from? I can see, okay, it's coming from sheet 1 in zone C7, so I can go back to sheet 1 and see, okay, here we go, there's my detailed view B. So it's just a nice way to help organize all of your information. So I'm going to grab my view and I'm just going to put it back because I want it on that first page. That looks just the way that I want it to. So the note is all kind of locked into the view. So if you notice when you're putting down notes or things like that, that purple boxes appear around the views. So if that purple box appears, that means that I'm going to drop the note inside the view and it will be linked with the view. But let's say you have a lot of views close together and you want to lock it inside of one view specifically. If you double click on a view, you can see that purple box gets thrown there kind of permanently. And that's because I've locked the view focus. So I can grab a note and I can put it all the way down here, but it's still linked and inside that view. So if I grab and move the view, you can see that note I have generated has a link to it and it's moving with it. So you can lock and unlock your view focus by either double clicking or right clicking and selecting unlock view focus. So you can lock a sheet focus as well. So if I double click on the sheet, you can see this purple boundary that exists, and I can add a note really close to a view, which would normally go inside of a view, and I can even put it right there. But we can see that it is not linked with that view. That note is locked in focus with the sheet. So I'm going to delete that note, don't actually want it. Line that up there, and then of course you can double click on the sheet or right click and unlock the sheet focus to unlock it. You can also lock view positions as well. So if I right click on this view, I can lock the view position, and now I can't move it. So I can't accidentally come in here and move something I don't want to, except if I move the parent view, the child view still has an alignment to it. So it is still going to move relative to my parent view. So on this second sheet here, I want to pull in my flat pattern. And with my flat pattern, I want to export it as a DXF so I can get it cut. So I'm going to hide my bend notes because I don't want to see those. And I want my scale to be 1:1. So I'm going to change my sheet scale here 1:1, but we can see that, okay, this is way too big. It's not lining up with my sheet. The sheet's too small. So I'm going to come in here and change my sheet size and my sheet format. So I've already made a format for a C size, but something that's new to 2017 is the ability to select different sheets to apply this modification to. So I can apply it only to the sheet that I'm on. I can apply it to all of the sheets, or I can apply it to any combination of sheets that I have. I only have 2, so I don't have many options. But I only want to apply this to this active sheet that I'm on, and I can apply that change. And we can see now that my sheet is bigger and my flat pattern actually fits on side of my sheet. So a common issue that people run into when they work with flat patterns occurs because they don't really realize what the flat pattern view is referencing. And if I look over here, it has its own specific configuration for the flat pattern. So if I'm looking at this flat pattern, there's something I don't like and I want to make a change, and I open my part file from the flat pattern, we can see that I'm not working at my top level configuration. I'm working in a derived configuration made specifically for that flat pattern. So any changes I do to this flat pattern aren't going to propagate to the top level. So if I unflatten it and go back to my drawing, it will mess up the configuration. So I've seen people give me a file like this, they're saying my flat pattern doesn't work. It says I'm in the flat pattern. Well, it's because you changed the configuration of the flat pattern. So when you're working with sheet metal parts, you want to make sure that you're not tampering with that flat pattern configuration. That configuration is made only for your drawings. So your drawing can reference that flat pattern in the flattened state. So with this flat pattern here, I want to cut it. I want it to get cut out, but I want to keep the size perfect. So each cutting tool has a radius, and that radius is really small, but I need some extreme precision here for this footrest part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my offset entities tool. So I'm going to grab my face, I'm going to offset my entities, but it's going to be really small. 0.15 millimeters is all the radius of the cutting tool I'm using is. So you can see it's a really tiny difference, but for high precision parts, your part will come out smaller if you don't actually do this. So that's what I want to do. I've offset my part a little bigger, but now I have all of this extra information that I don't want. I don't want the original model. So I'm going to hide that dimension there. And I'm also going to come in and I'm going to hide my part as well. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to hide my part. And we can see now that I only have that outer boundary. And then I can come in here and start hiding all of my annotations as well. So I'd open my hide show annotations and just click on all those, or box select them or something and right click and hide to hide all of those annotations. So that's a reversible process. There's also the option to convert the view to a sketch. So this is irreversible. So what that's going to do is that's going to take all of these model edges and that's going to convert them to sketch entities. So I can have them as a block and keep the relative distance between them constant. But I don't want to do that because I want to delete a whole bunch of stuff. So now that I've converted this to a sketch, I can come in here and start deleting all of the lines that I don't want. So again, this is definitely a more permanent way to do it. It is irreversible because I can't go from a sketch to a view. But lots of ways to kind of do the same thing, whatever works for you. But my end result is going to be the same with my model edges accounting for the thickness of my cutting tool. So just like that, I have my perfectly sized DXF part, which is offset so I can get the exact dimensions that I want. So I have this other drawing here of an axle, and I'm sure you guys, oh, come back, drawing. And I'm sure you guys know how to deal with this to make it fit on your page, and that's using your break view. So you can break this view here, put your two breaks in, but trying to get them to line up perfectly and be evenly spaced on either side is sometimes a challenge. So what I didn't know for the longest time is that you can actually dimension the location of these break lines. So I can go from my break line to a point on the model, and I can set it. So I can say, okay, 2 inches from that edge. And I'll grab this other break line, grab the model, put this 2 inches from the edge. And now you know that your break is symmetric, and no matter what happens to your model geometry, that break's going to stay symmetric. So if you shrink the size of this axle, well, it's always going to be 2 inches from that wider diameter part. Or if you make it longer, it'll always be 2 inches. Or if you have multiple configurations of it, and you're copying your drawings and just switching the configurations, that's one way to make sure that that happens in a nice, smooth, easy process. So we have this nice wheel assembly, and we want to document the assembly process. So what I've done is I've made a couple different configurations and display states, and I'm going to utilize those to show the assembly process. So stage one here is assembling the brake disc, but if you look at our model, we have the axle in there, the caliper, and a whole bunch of pieces that don't actually exist when you're putting that hub down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leverage a display state where all of those components are hidden. So using a combination of configurations and display states, I can show the different stages of my assembly process. So now if I go to my stage 2, we can see that everything is positioned, so my brake disc has been screwed on. But once I activate my stage 2 display state and unhide all of the other components, we can see that they've been exploded, and we're going to show how they assemble together. So let's make a drawing from this assembly here, and we'll use our same template that we have. And that looks good to me. And we're going to grab our model view from that wheel and axle assembly, and we're going to do our stage 1 exploded, and I even created a view for it as well. So that's using my orientation commands, hitting the space bar, saving the view. And I'm also going to pick my display state at stage 1, and I'm going to drop this into place. So I'm going to drop it on my screen here, and you can see it's laid out the exact way that I want. It's showing how to assemble the brake disc. On my next page, I'm going to do the same kind of thing, but for stage 2. So I'm going to grab the stage 2 configuration. I don't have a view yet, so I'm just going to grab the isometric, see how that looks. But I do have my display state, so that will unhide all those other components. And I'm going to drop it on my screen. So once everyone catches up, that one took some time there. There we go. We can all see this now. And that's showing all those other components. But if you look, my tire is covering that axle. I don't really like the orientation of this isometric view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my heads-up display and use my 3D drawing view. And that will allow me to rotate and manipulate my drawing view. So I can save this drawing view. but I'm not going to. I'm just gonna, I like it, so I'll hit my check mark, and that's the way I want it to look. That looks good. I'm happy with it. On my third sheet, I want to show an isometric section view. So I'm just going to grab my front view, and I only want to show the hub and axle, so I'm going to grab that display state, and I'm going to drop it on here. And one way you can create an isometric view is to actually go into your configuration, into the part file, make a configuration, and cut away at your geometry. But there's a way that you can do that completely inside the drawing. So I made myself a section view right here, just the standard way using my section view tool. But if you right-click on the section view, you have the ability to generate an isometric section view. So I'm going to click on that, and we can see that it has, in fact, given us an isometric view of that section that I created. So right now it's being projected slightly downward. I can't move it, but I can break that alignment. So right-clicking on a view, going into alignment, I can break the alignment, and that gives me free access to move the view around as I please. Let's say I don't actually like the isometric view. I can also utilize my 3D drawings view and manipulate that section. Maybe I want to show that angle. I like that better. I can do that, and that's looking really nice. Easy way to create a section view without having to go into the model and create a configurations that's cutting away other aspects of your model. So if you're like me and you create some views and then you don't like them and you end up deleting them, so like this view here, let's say, okay, I don't like that. Then I'm going to create another view, and my labeling gets all mixed up. So we can see here that this is now section CC, but section BB or view B doesn't actually exist anywhere in my document, and that can be kind of deceiving. So if I catch that right away, I can say, whoop, no, that's actually section B, change that in my property manager, and that's all good. Everything's all fine and dandy. But if you don't catch that, there's this really nice option, and that is to reuse view letters from deleted auxiliary, detail, and section views. So then that will take out that extra input you have to put in if you accidentally delete a view. You don't have to go back and change all your lettering. It'll make sure you're not missing any of the letters. You can also go into your sheet properties and change the next view datum label. So right now I only have B in there, but I had created a C at one point. So I can change this and say, okay, my next one is actually going to be C. So that's a nice way to deal with your view labeling if you accidentally skip one because you deleted something. The last thing I'm going to show you guys today, so let me close everything here, is something that kind of eluded me for a really long time. So on your view palette, there's these little A's beside some of your views. And a lot of the time I kind of just ignored that. I was like, yeah, it's A for awesome. And asked some people, they didn't know, they're like, don't worry about it, everything is working fine, so I kind of ignored it. But for this, I kind of digged in. I was like, okay, what does that actually mean? And what that A stands for is the annotations. So you also have annotation views. So anytime you have a sketch on your standard planes, your front plane, top plane, right plane, that dimension that you put on those sketches gets put onto your annotation views. So all this sketch was done on the front plane. We can see all those annotations were put onto our front annotation view. We have a right one and we have a top one. So that's really cool. But what's nice about it is that if you import your annotations, all of those dimensions will automatically propagate as you drag your views onto your drawing. So you can see the formatting has changed to match my document settings or my drafting standard. So that's also really cool. You can create custom annotation views by right-clicking on your annotations folder and inserting an annotation view. Or I'm going to be a little fancy with it and I'm going to make one that's a section view. So I'm going to save my section view, but not as a view orientation, but as a drawing annotation view. So I'm going to save that, but I don't have any annotations on it, don't have any dimensions. So I'm going to go to my front view and I'm just going to steal them all from the front view. So holding down Control and grabbing all of these annotations and then right-clicking, I can select my annotation view. You can see right now it's in the front view, but I get a nice little box and I can put it on my section view AA. So now we can see that my section view has all of those annotations, and what I can do is when I refresh my view palette, I can grab that section view and drop it onto my drawing, and when I tell it to import the annotations, you can see that all of those annotations will appear on that drawing for me automatically. So that saves me from having to use that model items command, because if they are in an annotation view, just checking that box on will allow those to propagate automatically. So with that being said, that is the first half of our drawing night school. Our second half will be another hour with me next week, and we will go into some detailing tricks and tips. So I'm not going to show you how to use that model items tool. I'm sure you guys already know how to use that. But I'm going to go into some of the niche areas of detailing, hopefully show you guys something you've never seen before, and then talk about some of the additional tools available for drawings, like Drawing Compare, Bomb Compare, Dim Expert. But that is all for next week. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and everybody hopefully learned something. I know I did when I was creating this. So it looks like we have some questions here. So I'm going to look into these questions and see if I can throw in some answers. But that is all that I have formally to show you. So if you want to excuse yourself and not listen to the questions, you are very welcome to. I will not be personally offended. But for now, I'm going to dig into these questions. Can you have a different mini title block on all sheets after sheet 1? So yeah, the title block is all dependent on your sheet format. Oop, let me go to my drawing here. So every sheet that you have, you can choose a different sheet format for. So let's say I want this sheet to have a different title block. That means it needs to have a different sheet format. So when I create it, I come in here and I choose, okay, maybe I want it to have this title block. So it will have that sheet format. And then using that selection tool, I can apply different sheet formats to multiple sheets. So if I have 10 sheets, I can say, okay, apply this sheet format to sheets 1, 8, 7, and 6, even though I said I only have 5, but they're numbered that way in my imagination there. So the answer to that question is yes, you can have different title blocks for different sheets. Cool. That seems to be it for questions. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you want to come listen to me next week for part 2 of our night school webinar.